Florian, welcome to YogoJo podcast, and many thanks to our friend Satvik Hasna from Harvard Medical School for introducing us. So could you please introduce yourself and tell us about your work, but also about the journey, your journey with yoga, how it started, how it developed, and how did you get to where you are now?
Okay, yeah, hello, and first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Florian Engel. I'm a researcher in sports and exercise science at the Wuerzburg University. It's in Bavaria. So my focus basically is on training and exercise with children and adolescents. I do some research about sports and exercise with a relatively broad range of kids. So from young athletes to sedentary as well as obese kids. So I focus on how training is affecting different parameters, and of course, yoga and children is one of my objectives in research. Basically, my research with yoga and kids started as a co-worker asked me to join a research project about yoga in the kindergarten, and I joined the project, and since then I'm really interested in this kind of research. Yeah, and that's, I guess, what brought me here today.
So let's talk a little bit more about your research. So as you said, you focus on youth sport, and your special interest is in exercise psychology and adaptations to endurance training. And you work with young athletes, but also with kids who, like these days, spend lots of time seated and in front of their screens. So can you share with us some major findings and tell us a bit more detail about them? What is the most exciting, or if you like, revolutionary discovery in these areas?
Yeah, okay. So one big topic is that we go to places where children and adolescents are typically sedentary, which is school and kindergarten. So we performed some studies about training, physical exercise in the classroom, how does it affect motor performance, so endurance, strength, flexibility, and so on. And we found out that you can actually train within the classroom with just really, really short breaks, like 6 minutes breaks with high intensity movements, more or less on the spot, that you can improve some performance and improve the mood. And then we went into the kindergarten and had a yoga intervention. But my most recent research topic is that we performed some kind of meta-analysis. It's some kind of analysis of all the existing research to one topic. And we analyzed interventions with physical activities with children and adolescents. So we found out that the risk is quite high that when you add some additional physical activity during the day or during the week to children that are more or less sedentary. So we found out that the risk is really high that kids compensate this additional physical activity with an increase of sedentary behavior later that day or later that week. The phenomenon is quite new, and it's called compensation. Of course, for us, it's not a positive thing, but there are some strategies to make the compensation less likely. So, of course, we are working on this in different settings. But if you replace the sedentary time, like sitting time in the classroom or sitting during homework or sitting time during watching television, if you replace this sedentary time with some physical activity, it can reduce the risk of compensating the physical activity. Or if you increase the intensity of physical activities, for example, during physical education, this can reduce the risk of compensation.
So what is compensation exactly?
Compensation is, I mean, for example, you add some 10 minutes during every class of physical activity with a high intensity. You have, like, you do it 3 or 4 times per day. You have like 40 or 50 minutes of additional physical activity time. And then the kids go home and spend more time sedentary as they would do without your additional physical activity. So basically they spend more time seated at home. The reasons are not quite clear yet, but this is a phenomenon of compensation.
Oh my goodness. So that means that if you exercise them more during the day, they try and rest more in the afternoon.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, exactly. And you can prevent it if you if you develop a routine of replacing sitting time with physical activity. And another good strategy is to get them in the sports club and really habituate the sports and the physical activity. If it's from one point when it's really implemented in their daily life, and if they're doing it with a high internal motivation, you can also reduce the risk of compensation.
So it's almost as if it needs to be in kids' nature or a habit of doing sport. Otherwise, if you introduce sport without them being engaged or wanting to do that, that's when that compensation happens.
Yeah. We think so. On one hand, we think the internal motivation should be really high. So if you just make physical activity mandatory without really getting the kids, motivating the kids, the risk for compensation may be high.
So did you find any ways of motivating the kids?
Yes. If you look in settings where they are engaged in clubs, in sports clubs, the risk of compensation is really, really very low. And if you develop some routines, like during school classes or during television watching, like every 10 minutes doing this or that physical activity, you can reduce the risk of compensation. Yeah, but maybe, so we don't know definitely, but maybe the internal motivation is the most important factor.
But also probably a type of activity that you're introducing them, because if it's something that they don't fancy doing, or it's not cool, that they won't really do that, or if it's something exhausting, they don't really feel like they want to do it.
Yeah, sure. That's really important, very important, that they like it, what they're doing. Yeah.
What's your recent project about? Excite us.
My recent project, I don't know when you can read it, but it will be a research topic about young elite athletes. It's not really related very much to yoga, but we want to do a research topic on young elite athletes and research some different aspects of how to train and what's important for young athletes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, of course. In a young elite sport, we have a high percentage of overtraining syndromes, and in different kinds of sports, we have different rates. And one really important question is how you can achieve top performance. Develop the young athletes to successful adult athletes, but it's really important to reduce the amount of overtraining syndromes, because this is not good for the children, and it increases the risk of dropping out from the sports. So it's really important to have parameters where you can recognize some overtraining in really early stadium.
And how many children do you think can become like elite athletes?
It's a really low percentage. It depends from the sports. For example, in soccer, you have many possibilities to become a professional soccer athlete. But on the other hand, many children are training and competing in soccer. So it depends from the percentage, how many professional contracts do you have and how many children are competing with you.
But do you think, obviously it is like a lottery to a large degree, or game of numbers, but at the same time I believe that those who are professional or who become professional athletes would also have certain predispositions or certain way of training or developing, that they actually make it to the top.
Yeah, that's the most relevant question. I personally think it's a combination of nature and nurture. So, on the one hand, your personal resources are really very important, and your personal talent is important. But on the other hand, the right training strategies, the right setting, the right coaches, and the social support is 50% of the recipe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is there space for yoga to create elite athletes?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's a good addition to some athletic training, because yoga is not so very competitive, and on the physical side, the flexibility, the core strength, the balance is really important in many different kinds of sports. And many successful athletes do train some yoga, some like long distance runner, mountain bike professionals or triathletes. They actually practice yoga. So from my perspective, it's a good addition to some really athletic and competitive training.
There are many factors that impact our bodies on a daily basis, and they have impact on our performance, on how responsive we are, or whether we're grumpy or not, whether we sleep well or we don't. So how should we look after our bodies, after ourselves, to optimize our performance? What does science say about it?
It's not easy to answer this question, but from my perspective, it's clearly the amount and the intensity of physical education what impacts us a lot. I would not say impact us the most, but it has a big impact on many different parameters. But of course, there are dozens of other parameters or important variables that modulate the effect of that exercise we perform, like our daily diet, the sleep, the sedentary time we have. But of course, we have other factors like social interactions that do influence us. And to give a standard answer which fits for everybody is really difficult. But from my perspective, physical activity or training is a very important factor during the whole life. So if I could give one recommendation, you should practice a lot of physical activity from a very early age until a very old age.
Mm-hmm. That's a really very powerful message. Because very often it's easy to skip that physical exercise, and actually the busier we are, the more we need that. But actually, the busier we are, the more likely we are to just leave it to the side and say, "Look, I'm not doing that because I haven't got time."
Yeah, exactly, and we have a lot of research identifying exactly this answer as a main thing for skipping sports. No time, lack of time. It's in all the psychological research. The main reason for not exercising is lack of time. And as you said, it's really, really easy to skip the sport. And it's really easy to say, practice sports every day, but it's not so easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. But I never heard from anybody who would do an exercise that they actually regretted it at the end. Always the most difficult is to actually start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you're going to compare PE, the physical exercises at school, and yoga practice, where would you look for areas where they are mutually reinforcing? And where are the distinctive areas where they actually produce benefits on their own?
Okay, during the typical PE, kids are increasing their energy expenditure a lot, typical PE class, which is basically really a very good thing. The typical PE is often competitive and the kids blow off some steam. So sure, physical education can also be cooperative, meaning you can play games in which the kids have to cooperate. But most often it is competitive and the activation of the kids is increased a lot, which is not a bad thing, which is basically a good thing. And we need this increase of energy expenditure, and it's highly warranted, to blow out some steam. But during yoga, kids can learn some kind of self-regulation, so they can learn to calm themselves down. And yoga is activating the parasympathetic system, causing some kind of relaxation, and this you don't have in the typical physical education class. So this is the biggest difference between regular PE and yoga, that yoga is more some kind of meditative physical activity. It's not so competitive, and children increase their sensitivity and their awareness for themselves. So self-regulation, awareness for mood, awareness for their own body functions, like the breathing and the heart rate is increased. So they can learn a little bit of self-regulation and learn some inhibitory skills. But of course, this is a really long process. That's not from doing 2 weeks of yoga. It's really a long process. But these aforementioned things you often don't learn during the typical PE classes. And of course, you have the physical aspects from yoga, like improvement of flexibility, the improvement of your postural control, the improvement of balance, etc.
So do you think that, considering the long time until the benefits kick in, do you think it's useful for the kids to start early, to start at schools, to practice yoga? Because usually we find yoga when we hit the brick wall somewhere in the middle of our lives, 30, 40. So is there a reason behind introducing yoga to schools?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the sooner the earlier you start, the better it is. Basically, if we look at the history of physical education, you had like 20, 30, 50, 60 years ago, you just had the competitive sports in physical education, and physical education used to be always competitive. But now, in recent times, the non-competitive sports are really young physical education teachers. They do parkour running with the kids, they do slacklining, they do some kinds of sports which are not competitive, and yoga is one thing of it. Traditionally, yoga was for adults, for grown-ups, but there are many positive aspects of yoga, and of course of all non-competitive sports to be practiced in physical education. It's really a good addition to the physical education to practice some really slowly and meditating kinds of sports.
In terms of enhancing, for instance, learning and physical and academic performance, is there correlation between yoga and how good kids do at school?
Yeah, sure. So the recent research is really clear about that. So the majority of studies, they show a clear improvement of cognitive performance, of visual motor coordination. They show an improvement of improvement of attention and reduction of inattention and hyperactivity behavior. Additionally, we see things like reduction of negative mood and a reduction of anxiety. What is really interesting, so vulnerable groups like children with ADHD and children with anxiety and cognitive impairments, they benefit a lot, so they show big effects. Children who have already a quite high level considering their academic performance, so there the effects are not quite so big. Basically, we think that these effects stem from improved self-regulation, which can lead to improvements in the attention span. And an improved attention span is really beneficial for academic achievements. All in all, it's really difficult to identify the exact mechanisms because we as sports scientists, we can just detect the symptoms, but to identify the basic mechanisms it's really difficult. But we think that the self-regulation and the increases of the attention span lead to or are favorable for academic achievements.
Mm-hmm. So what about yoga and performance or achievements in sports? Because I would imagine that being able to self-regulate or kind of, pause for a second and not be driven by your emotions will be something that is very, very important in sport. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's a major topic, and you can learn the self-regulation with really different techniques. Yeah, like self-talk, or there are dozens of procedures to increase the self-regulation. And for top athletes, it's really important to practice the self-regulation. But for us for us grown-ups in the job, self-regulation is really very important. And it is associated with the success of one person. So the higher the level of self-regulation is, the higher the academic achievement is, the yearly income is higher in people who have a high level of self-regulation. It's really important, and yoga is probably supporting the capabilities of self-regulation.
Mm-hmm. So can you just tell me a little bit more about self-regulation practice by athletes? How do they do that? What's the most recommended way of doing that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the self-talk is really a good technique to increase the self-regulation, to actually speak positively to yourself, formulate your goals and formulate your intentions, and really talk to yourself. I'm going to do this and that. This will help me to achieve that goal. And for professional athletes, they often work together with sports psychologists and practice and train this self-talk a lot.
Mm-hmm. It does definitely have the link with yoga philosophy, because it's all about being kind to yourself and being respectful of yourself, but also talking to yourself in a way that you would talk to your best friend. So if somebody is not really well, you would not go there and kick them with words like, oh, you useless, you're never going to do that. So why do you actually treat yourself this way when we're failing or when we're not doing as well? It's very common that we would just then talk to ourselves, you're absolutely useless, you're never going to achieve that. But actually what you're saying in terms of set a target, you overcome it, you can do it. That's what I'm going to achieve. That's just so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's important to avoid these negative thoughts. It's one major aspect for professional athletes or for competitive athletes to avoid negative thoughts and speak positive to yourself. So it's basically what you said, treat yourself in a positive way. this has the potential to contribute to positive developments.
Do you have any views on practices like similar to yoga, like karate or tai chi, that also have or gained quite a large popularity amongst kids? And it's claimed that it improves their memory, attention, learning, but also problem solving and decision making. Have you observed correlation, or do you have opinion on that?
All in all, it's all the kinds of sports you mentioned. They are have a lot to do with self-regulation. So, but first of all, we should not expect some miraculous transformation with our children when we start to exercise yoga or karate or other kinds of sports. It's more a marginal gain with the individual. I mean, you have to practice for a long time and on more or less regular basis. But from my perspective as a researcher, when you analyze large groups, which is what I do, you can see, from a statistical point of view, a clear influence of yoga and clear influence of karate on kids. But on the individual level, it might not be so clearly visible. But we think the most important thing causing that changes is the awareness and the awareness for yourself, the awareness for your emotions, and the self-regulatory skills you learn in these kinds of sports.
And do you think that there is also because you said that you observed that on the group level, and it may vary on the individual level. So have you also observed different dynamics amongst the children on the group level? I'm asking about it because I'm thinking, that if there's a group of kids who practice karate, tai chi, or yoga, and then they are at school, then dynamics between them is different, because they kind of, they already experienced something else, so that there may be potentially less bullying or aggressive behaviors between them. But I just don't really want to suggest the answer. That's just me thinking about it.
To be honest, I didn't read any research about the dynamics, and as a researcher, before we start a study, we defined the tests we do, and we didn't test for any dynamics. So what is influencing the success of an interventional study? But of course, aggressive behavior is reduced when you have interventions with yoga or karate. This is what the research is showing us.
One of the reasons for academic failure is the deficit of attention or hyperactivity in kids. So how the physical exercise can help children to improve their behavior and mood, and then as a consequence that their academic performance. But maybe just let's focus on that physical exercise aspect first. Can physical exercise help kids do better and then help them improve their behavior?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we are really, myself as a sports scientist, I'm really convinced that physical exercise can improve academic achievement. So basically, we think this all stems from improved self-regulation, which improves the attention span and which favors the academic achievement. But we have to say, most of the studies are performed in a setting where we have a lack of physical activity. Yeah? So at school, in kindergarten, it's not so severe with the lack of physical activity. But in school, more or less 90% of the studies, if they implement some kind of physical activity there, the academic achievement, the attention span is increased. So in the first place, we think especially in the setting school, we have a really severe lack of physical activity. And as soon as you implement there some kind of movement, you see positive effects. So we think physical activity should be increased on daily basis at school. We really see positive effects there. That's the main message. On the one hand, we think yoga is causing it, but on the other hand, the main reason is because we have too less physical activity at school.
Mm. So why does it happen? Why there is that relationship between physical activity and kids' performance? Do you know? Did you get to the bottom of that?
Yeah, it's not really easy to answer, but we think as soon as you move your body, different regions in your brain are activated and stimulated. And this activation of your brain helps in some way cognitive processes. We cannot describe it 100% precise, but we think it's one major part of the activation of some areas in your brain. And of course, if you are physically active, you start to promote some hormones and some really important substances which are activating you and make it easier for you to learn. Yeah, so you some kind get in a good mood when you are physically active.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's definitely that, and there's that euphoria, or the feeling of happiness after you exercise, isn't it?
Exactly. And this, we have to think, even really short breaks of physical activity. Yeah, it's like these micro breaks, like 1 or 2 minutes. Like I'm talking about really 120 seconds of physical movement can improve your attention and can cause this activation of your brain regions. So I'm not talking about jogging for 60 minutes or doing a yoga class of 60 or 90 minutes. Even really tiny short breaks of movement can improve your brain activity.
Is yoga practice an effective tool when working with school children with, for instance, mental health problems or with mental diseases like Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, or autism? Do you have a view on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so basically, yoga has been shown to be successful, to really have an effect on children with emotional and behavioral problems, with cognitive impairments. Basically, it has a really big and positive effect. Even the vulnerable groups, they benefit a lot from physical activity and especially from yoga.
What about the visual attention? Why is it important to kids? Could you share some findings from research that you have been involved to support the statement that yoga leads to faster attention times and development of visual attention in children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at school we have a lot of information coming in as visual information. So the visual information processing is really very important. And it is suggested that the positive effects on attention leading to increased time children are engaged in academic tasks. So they can longer sit there and concentrate, focus on one task, which has a big potential effect on academic performance in the long run. The increased physical activity and an increased physical fitness as a result, it changes some selective structures of the brain, and these these changes in the structures causing functional or improving functional and structural connectivity. As a result, I mean, the research on that is really, it's really limited in the number and the scope. So it's really hard to draw firm conclusions. But in one way or the other, yoga and physical activity in general has an effect on it causes structural changes in the brain, which facilitate academic achievements.
If we do not address the problems with attention early in person's life, does it have a potential to have some spillover effects later on in our lives?
Mm-hmm. So it's really important to work on attention problems at an early age because there's a clear association between attention problems during the childhood. They are associated with poorer executive functions in late adolescence. And we are finding, so many studies are finding that. So we have the same relationship, for example, with obesity or poor motor performance. If you are obese or have a poor motor performance at an early age, it is more likely that you will be obese as an adult or have a poor motor performance as an adult. And the same is relevant for academic achievement and the executive function. So with a high level of executive functions in a young age, it's really associated a lot with high executive functions as an adult. And it's really likely when you have attention problems at early age, it's likely that you have the attention problems as an adult. So it's really important to work on this issue starting from an early age.
But as you said, that there is that tempting direct comparison with children obesity. So we can teach children to eat healthy diet, but how do we teach children to increase their attention?
Actually, you cannot teach it directly to increase the attention. We as adults, as grown-ups, we have the responsibility to design a setting and to design an environment which has a positive influence on the attention span. I can say 10 times to my children, focus, focus, focus. But if the environment is not appropriate, my words won't have an effect. So it's more or less about designing an environment that has a positive influence on the attention span.
I may say, I'm tired. I'm stressed at work. I've had a bad day. And on the top of that, I need to care about creating that good environment for my child. It's just more likely to give them Xbox or game console to go and play and leave me alone. Why would parents have to care to actually remember to create that environment for the kids, almost on every step?
Okay, yeah, it's a good example. I mean, the typical day you come from work, you have some kind of bad mood, you are stressed, you are tired, you have some kind of negative experience and negative emotions, and if in that situation, if you overcome your tiredness and your bad mood and go and have some physical activity, you can actually turn this negative emotion into something positive. Yeah, it will change your mood as a parent and the mood of your kids. It's not always easy, but the physical activity has the potential to turn something negative in a positive situation. So my basic advice would be decrease sitting time and increase physical activity time. Encourage physical activity of your children anywhere and every day. And what is important as well is social support in the family. So you as a parent, you should also be physical active. maybe do some physical activities with your children. If you are a good example to your kids, it is way easier for the children to be as well physically active.
One takeaway message for the children, for the teenagers, for the families who would need a little bit of encouragement or motivation?
So yeah, my message would be it's not easy for everybody. I know professional athletes and even professional athletes you watch on TV. It's not always easy for them as well to train, to be physically active. Everybody has to overcome his own tendency for not being active. And the main message is decrease sitting time and increase physical activity time. That would be my main message.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Florian. It was so nice to talk to you. I'm very energizing to talk to you. I almost feel like, I want to go get changed and go for a run now. to sitting too much longer. So thank you so much. It's been absolutely great.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be at your podcast.
Thank you.